Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Troy Erickson from the Secrets of Scale podcast. And today I am joined by Chase Dimond live. And we're going to talk a little bit about how he scaled his agency to over $75 million in attributed revenue for his clients. He's probably one of the very best ecom and Klaviyo marketing agencies out there. So, Chase, welcome. And how are you?
Doing well, thanks. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Great. So, I'm tuning in from St. Petersburg, Florida. Where do you live?
Right on. I'm in Orange County, California. It's not Orange County, Florida, but Orange County, California.
I used to live in Orange County, Florida. So
A
that's
small
very
world.
cool. I'm actually really excited for this interview because I've never really chatted with you live other than just like texting on Facebook Messenger. So I've seen a lot of your content. I know you're really smart. I've been at a lot of live conferences on Zoom where you've been speaking and I've been speaking, but we've never chatted. So if you could tell me and all of our listeners your story briefly and how you discovered email and how you got into this whole industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story is a little bit unique. So I'm gonna make this really quick. But at 13 years old, I was diagnosed with a disease, and it took me an entire year to basically to figure out what that disease was. I kept getting misdiagnoses after misdiagnoses. And at the age of 14, I finally figured out that I had Crohn's disease. So after I figured out what I had, I wanted to take it upon myself as a 14-year-old to raise awareness and raise fundraising kind of for this disease, because I didn't think it was fair for people to go a whole year kind of suffering without actually knowing. If you're going to have this, you want to get treatment, you want to get help. So I basically taught myself guerrilla marketing. I was taking ads out in the paper. I was messaging friends on AIM. I was calling people's houses. I was sending emails to their parents' emails accounts, doing all those types of things. So I basically learned guerrilla marketing through that experience of getting Crohn's and wanting to raise awareness. And then throughout high school, throughout college, every business that I had built or every business that I had worked on had some component of email. So I was doing like sales and kind of cold calling. And I was like, man, this sucks. I don't like calling people. So I started figuring out how to do like cold email. And then I was selling like software and I figured out how to do cold email. So a lot of my career initially started on the cold email side. And I actually used cold email in an untraditional way where I built an email travel series in 2017 from 0 to 500,000 email subscribers, largely on the back of cold email. So what I did is I went on Instagram and I found people that posted with hashtag travel, people that followed accounts like Nat Geo, or people that geotagged places like Bali, Indonesia. And I built a tool with some developers on our team that would aggregate all these people's email addresses along with their social data so we could send highly personalized emails. So for you, I might say, hey, Troy, came across your Orange County, Florida photo on Instagram, wanted to invite you to join this travel community with other like-minded travelers, right? So I might link you to a Facebook group where you'd have to join and enter your email. I might link you directly to a giveaway page that said, hey, Troy, you could win 4 nights in 5 days in Hawaii if you enter. Or I would directly drop you on our landing page. So cold email was like the largest driver of acquisition. And then also too, the whole business was an email newsletter. And then I was doing all that. One of my buddies, who's now one of my business partners, said back in 2017, dude, the stuff you're doing is so cool. But at one point or another, you might end up on the wrong side of the law, right? Like GDPR hadn't come out. None of California privacy came out yet. So he's like, why don't you come over into e-commerce? So at the 2017 mark, I dove headfirst into e-commerce and now run an agency in the space. So long-winded, kind of started out of necessity through the disease, did it at every job or internship or business I had throughout high school, college, and afterward, and really dove headfirst at the end of 2017 into e-com email.
That's awesome. So one thing that I found really interesting is Crohn's is something that's kind of, I feel like in our industry, there's been a lot of awareness of it lately. And there's a lot of, especially guys like eating on the carnivore diet. And like Ian Stanley, he talks about it all the time. He's releasing a product for Crohn's. And there's just a lot of high level people kind of becoming more aware of this. And whether or not they have it, they're kind of like switching to that method of just like health and eating. And it's really cool to see how those passions kind of drive you towards something that seems like it's not related, but it is. So, what have some of the more like impactful things that you've done? Like, how do you impact people and within like educating them about a disease, and like how did that transition into writing ecom?
Yeah. So when I was starting out, like we basically figured out that like as I was meeting other kids in the community, like no one wanted to talk about it, right? Like we're all going through like our teenage years, we're all growing up. Like no one wants to talk about this Crohn's things, right? It's like this weird stuff in your stomach and it has all these kind of weird things that people aren't comfortable talking about, right? So the first thing that I did was I created basically like a group within Orange County that connected people that had Crohn's that were typically between like 13 and 18. We had some kids that were a little bit older, but just really giving them like a safe space to kind of share their story with other people that went through it, and kind of allowed them to practice telling friends and family and just making it seem a lot more normal and kind of less uncomfortable. That was one. Two is like we would put on these walks and these restaurant fundraisers that actually raise dollars. So the charity I ended up becoming on the board of the Orange County chapter, which was like the largest board of the charity. It's called the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They do about $50 million a year in fundraising. So we were doing restaurant fundraisers and walks that were donating thousands and tens of thousands of dollars every single event or every single year for this organization. So a lot of it was just kind of connecting with folks that had it, raising awareness about it through these walks and through these fundraisers, right? So I would bring my friends and my family and people that were in my circle, and they would tell their friends, right? So now you have this kind of network and viral effect. And again, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but it's almost like this referral and this ambassador program and this word of mouth campaign that kind of, we'd get thousands and tens of thousands of people sometimes to these walks. Now, these were a bunch of people that now knew of it. So if someone told you, I'm having stomach pains and I have to go to the bathroom or this, that, or the other, you might say something like, oh, by the way, my friend Chase, or I went to this event where they talked about Crohn's or colitis. Colitis is the other part of it. And they're formed under IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease. Maybe you have this, right? Maybe it's worth checking out. So that's kind of how we raised awareness, and fundraising was just getting people to these events and to these fundraisers where we could kind of share our story.
That's amazing. So it's really interesting how you have somewhat of an organic background, because I talk to a lot of people at your level, and like I'm running ads, they're running ads. I'm not sure if I've ever seen an ad from you. I could be very wrong, but do you use a lot of organic marketing, or how are you getting clients right now?
Yeah. So for me personally, like my specialty has always been on the non-paid side. Like up until recently, I've never run an ad. And the only ads I've run is ads on Twitter because it's very simple and very easy. And I've never run a Facebook ad. I've had some ads come from my account for like an event that I did that you spoke at in the past. But I myself am not an ads guy. It's kind of confusing. I don't really get it. So in terms of client acquisition, in the early days, and again, obviously today is very different, but in the early days, it was a lot of cold email, right? What kind of email marketer would I be if I wasn't sending cold emails and kind of doing that to get clients? So cold email was initially kind of the method. And then things just like posting on social channels and asking for helps and asking for referrals and trying some stuff on LinkedIn and starting to do podcasts. Like that was really like the early days, was just being really scrappy and trying to get a couple clients and really focusing on getting case studies and social proof. Today, almost I think 99% of what we do is organic inbound through people that are on my newsletter, or people that hear something like this, or people have gone through like a course, or podcast or event. So today everything is all inbound through essentially content, whether that's a video, audio, or written post.
So what kind of following do you have between your list and Twitter?
On Twitter, I have in the 40 something thousand count, but Twitter's, in my opinion, probably one of the most underrated platforms. The reason being is that the organic reach on Twitter is massive. So I think Twitter has massive organic reach. LinkedIn's decent. And then obviously TikTok, which is a whole nother beast, has really good organic reach. Things like a Facebook account, like a personal account, you're obviously confined to at max 5,000 people seeing it. In most cases, obviously, not that many people are going to see it. On Instagram, Instagram Reels obviously is being rewarded a little bit heavier than other things. There's some organic reach there still. YouTube's also nice. So long-winded. Like I think Twitter is a really great place, especially for folks in copy, for folks in ecom, for folks in SaaS, to go on and find like-minded folks. So about 40,000 followers equates to about 3 to 4 million impressions a month that I'm getting. And then
Wow. Yeah.
on email, I have about 26,000 people that receive my weekly newsletter every Monday.
That's amazing. Yeah, just to know that it's mainly organic. So how long have you been at this? I know you said you kind of started when you were 13. Kind of curious as to the timeline.
So I started as a freelancer at the end of 2017. And then I joined another agency as like a partner that brought me on. And that agency was around for like 3 or 6 months before they kind of merged or got acquired with another agency. And that agency was going in the direction of being more general, kind of offering paid social and paid search and email. And I've just always been a specialist. I've always believed in specializing, and that's been really good to me. So I was like, hey, this is cool, but I'd rather just go start my own thing. So I started the current agency now back in June of 2018. On the retention / email and SMS side, right? We're about 65 or 70 people right now. And we're working with about 115, 120 something clients. So that started in 2018. A lot of like the personal brand stuff kind of started around the same time. Twitter, I started in April 2020. Newsletter, I started April 2020. So those two assets I talked about have been around for, I don't know, a little over a year and a half.
It's cool, yeah, because I talk to a lot of people, and obviously I have an agency as well, and then I also coach freelancers. And a lot of freelancers are actually like extremely surprised at what organic marketing can turn into. And I basically show them, long story short, how to like talk about things that they've actually tried and practiced inside of groups, and then message people who engage with that in a way that's not salesy and is like completely, authentic. And a lot of people give up too early because they think like, oh, my first post didn't get me a client, I'm going to give up now. But you never know, with every single person you talk to, they could hit you up next week, they could hit you up 3 months from now, and really just start to like build up a whole client roster, and you get referrals. And it's really amazing what you can do with organic. And I think everything you're saying really speaks to that, because I didn't even know that
Yeah.
you were doing all that, or that a really large agency like yours was doing that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not the best example, but it's almost like I equate it to like a game of roulette, right? Like you just don't know what's going to happen, and every post you make like has a chance of some regard being seen by one person that's the right person, maybe 10 people that are the right people, right? You post on TikTok, you post on Twitter. If they get picked up by the right people, like you're one post away from going viral, right? Like that's kind of how I think about it. I mean, now obviously I have an audience, so it's a little bit easier. But for the first year and a half that I posted, like I think the only people I would comment on were like my mom and my grandma, right? Like no one would ever comment on my stuff. And obviously it gets easier and it changes over time. But you're right. Most people throw in the towel after a handful of weeks or a handful of months. I honestly think you have to give at least 6 to 12 months to something before you can throw in the towel. And again, obviously, right? Like if it's the right thing, like if you see other people making money from it, give it 6 to 12 months. If you're trying something brand spanking new and you have no idea how it's going to work, maybe 3 or 6 months is the right threshold. But if you look at someone like yourself or myself that have proven offers and have an audience, go do what we're doing and just give it time, and it's going to happen. The space is so big. I'm friends with, quote unquote competitors, right? Like technically we could be competitive, but here we are sharing knowledge. I think having like that abundance mindset is so important, right? Become friends with your quote unquote competitors, share knowledge with them, learn from them. And when you kind of, mastermind, that's when you both get better off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually going to ask you that question here shortly. Because like when I started out, I kind of had that same mindset too. And a lot of people I talk to who are starting out, they just think like competitors are mean. And a lot of times when I was starting out, I'd look at somebody like you and be like, I don't like that guy. And the more I thought about it, it was like, why do I not why do I not like somebody? Like that doesn't make any sense. They do the same thing. We should be on the same team. And another really heavy like Twitter and ecom and Klaviyo guy, Philip Rivers, I've been talking to him for a while. Maybe you know him.
Yep. Phil's a great
Um,
guy.
yeah, it's cool just to see how we're all connected. So, um, yeah, utilizing friendships rather than like competition, it just helps tremendously, because there's so many opportunities there, and there's more than enough for all of us to eat. So, what are some like recent things you've done to kind of like utilize like other people in the industry? I know you did something with Rob Allen recently,
Yeah.
and you put your name on the Black Friday Summit. I mean, what else are you doing in that regard?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to look at it, right? I think in the early days, it's easier to leverage other people's platforms, right? So when you're starting out and you have an interesting story, it's easier to come on Troy's podcast or Chase's podcast or Rob's, event. That's easier, right? So in the early days, when I had no audience, I was trying to get on other people's podcasts, whether they were friends or just folks in the industry, and I'd ask for introductions. So that's the beginning. And then over time, as you build your own audience, you're doing a hybrid, right? You're putting on your own things, but you're also leveraging other people's things. So this past October it was, so I guess it feels way longer ago, a couple months ago, we hosted the first ever Black Friday Summit. I know you spoke, we had about 50 people speak, and it was a massive success. So for 2022, I'm now trying to plan with Rob and his partner, Amanda, like a quarterly event, right? For quarter one, we have something in mind. Quarter two is kind of like his copywriting freelancing summit. Q3 is, we're not sure yet. And Q4 will be the Black Friday Summit, right? So we're hosting that. I do a podcast. I speak at other events. So I'm speaking at an event in person in March. So anytime anyone asks me, I don't care how big or small it is, I always say yes, because other people gave me a chance. I was really small when I went on theirs. People have been small when they come on mine. So anytime people ask me, I typically say yes, as long as it's, a reasonable time. Like someone wants me to spend 4 hours on a podcast, it's like, all right, I don't know what to talk about for 4 hours, but if it's a 30-minute or 45-minute one, let's do it. So I have a bunch of my own things planned and I'm helping out a bunch of others.
Absolutely. And I totally agree too. It's like, I think I remember my very first article. There was this guy in India, his name was Mahul, and he gave me an article on a site and it like ranked on Google and it blew my mind. And then I got on podcasts and now I'm running my own. So it's really cool. And one thing that I'm kind of interested in at looking at starting is like kind of a mastermind setting. So it's like you've got an agency on one side, and then because we kind of understand, there's no scarcity mindset, instead we have abundance. I also want to teach a lot of people to kind of do what I do. And I do have like a lower ticket program, but I'm thinking about running my own events 4 times a year and providing just like even more value than I am now. Have you ever thought about that now that you're running virtual events?
Yeah, I got a couple of thoughts there. One is one of my business partners. His name is Nick Shackelford. He has an event series called Geek Out. And Geek Out, they have events like in LA. I think they've had in San Diego, Miami. They've had it all over, and they're pretty high ticket. Like typically to go out to one of their events, it's in the ballpark of like $3,000 to $5,000 just for the event. You have to get your own hotel, your own flights, and just seeing some of the numbers. I obviously can't share the specific numbers, but seeing some of the numbers, like they're doing 7 figures a year on these events. They monetize through sponsorship. So they've got big folks like a Thrasio, which is a huge Amazon aggregate that line up and pay big bucks. And then they also sell tickets, right? So they're making and monetizing through that. And I've just seen like the caliber of the events that they throw and just like the time and the insight and the knowledge that people get. Everyone wins. And if someone's paying 3 or 5K and they feel like they're winning, like that's something that you've done right. So I've been thinking about that. And I've been thinking more about like, I've been getting really into golf lately, and I've seen a bunch of people getting into golf, or even things like pickleball. Like, is there a way to kind of combine a mastermind with like a golf tournament and maybe have some kind of charity component, right? Like, I'm trying to tie like all these things together from the past, right? Like, can I throw a golf tournament that has a charity component that donates to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation? That obviously I got to put some money in my pocket, and then people that attend are better off because they've made connections, whether that be a new business partner, whether that be a new client, a new software vendor, and they learn, right? So I've been thinking about stuff like that. Um, In-person events are a lot of work, and I've got a lot of things on my plate. So as of now, I'm trying to do a quarterly virtual event. But who knows? What are you thinking? What's kind of on your mind?
Man, that is a really good question too. As far as like the fun element and the golf element, I've been kind of thinking about that too, because it's like I have side interests too, and it's like I enjoy playing music, and then I'll bring up Ian Stanley again because I know at his events he's like brought on a comedy show, and it's really interesting just to see what we're doing. It's like we sit here and write emails by day, and then we have other things at night. And we kind of want to combine them how we can and get them in there, but as far as the main thing, I would say having like what I really want to do is like all of our high ticket clients, I want to be able to put them in a group where we can all learn and share from each other and like, come up with promotions, ideas, share what's working, not just in the realm of email, but like sharing the secrets of scale. As you can kind of see, this podcast is alluding to something I'm going to be launching shortly. But also inviting, freelancers who have kind of made it past the beginning stage, maybe they're in the middle or like the higher stage where they're doing better, and it's kind of time to move on from just doing email and kind of take the next step. So I'm thinking 3 or 4 events a year and offering even more value than I do now inside my email secrets inner circle. So we'll see what happens. I have a lot of
Nice.
planning to do for the rest of December, because ads are really expensive right now. So I'm taking some time to chill out and plan out the next year.
Nice. That's exciting. I'm stoked to see what you launch.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you do too. But another question I had, so obviously, like I said, the podcast is Secrets of Scale. Obviously you scaled pretty tremendously. What are some of your secrets that have allowed you to get where you are? So I guess this question would be geared more toward like business owners or like freelancers who might want to start an agency.
Yeah, that's a good question. So a couple of things that come to mind. Like the first is, how much money you make is correlated to the size of the problems that you solve, right? The bigger the problem, the more money you can make. And I guess kind of tying that directly to email, when you first start out, you're working with clients that are smaller, right? You're basically taking whatever you can get. And, I've done it. You've probably done it. We've all done it, right? You work with clients that will probably pay you pennies on the dollar because you haven't proven yourself and they're not at the scale where they can pay you. So I think for me, right, is like starting either working for free or for pretty cheap out the gates just to get referrals and kind of good karma and experience and reps. was kind of the name of the game. But you realize, as you get more experience and kind of as you want to move up the ladder, that those same clients that you work with before aren't the same clients that you can work with now. In the early days, we were charging, hundreds of dollars a month, maybe $1,000 a month. And today, we're charging about 6 to 8K a month, right? So as we've increased our pricing every couple quarters, we have to increase the size of the clients that we work with. And the more revenue that we drive for them, the more they're going to want to retain and keep us, right? So kind of to sum that up, it's again, how much money you make is directly related to the problems that you solve, and you want to solve bigger problems. But you have to start small, right? Don't go for the big fish out the gates. Start for the smaller or medium guys and work your way up. Number two is most people don't get what they want because they're frankly afraid of asking for it, right? Don't be like most people. Go after what you want, right? If you want to go on Troy's podcast or Chase's podcast or speak at this event or do that, you have to speak up. No one's going to speak for you, right? I've never been afraid or shy or timid at speaking up. I'm always transparent. Like when I was first starting out, I would say, I'm just starting out. I've got some interesting stuff I would like to share. I don't want to pretend to know everything. And still, obviously, I don't know everything today. So I think speaking up and asking for yourself, and we kind of have like this saying where like, closed mouths don't get fed, right? Like that's like kind of that saying. So I think that's really important is send that cold email, hop on that call, ask your network for help. The people that want to see you win are going to help you, right? And everyone talks about like your net worth or your network is your net worth. And I just say like, when people want to see you win, you're going to win, right? So having close friends and allies and just being a good person honestly pays massive dividends for when you need something. And I focus on giving more than I take. So that way, when I ask for something, people line up to help. The other thing in the service business and really in any business is, caring about your clients as much as you care about your own business, right? I think a lot of people kind of treat their clients, second class, but you got to treat them first class. They have to be at or above your level because they're paying your bills, especially in a service business. There's so many agencies, right? Like if you're being snotty and if you don't care about them, they're going to find someone that do. There's enough people that really, frankly, give a shit that, be irreplaceable based off attitude and hustle. And obviously you have to have a skill set as well. And in that same vein, there's so many agencies that are just focused on client acquisition and not enough agencies that are focused on client retention. So those go hand in hand. And then I think the last few things I would mention is like, I think the biggest issues that we ran into initially were a few things. One was ego. Having an ego really kept us back from hiring great people. We thought we had to be the best. We thought everyone had to look to us as leaders, and therefore we created followers. And when you actually do that, you have to then be involved in every single decision. You can't take a step back. So over time, we started leaving, our ego at the door, and we started hiring people that were better than us. And really, honestly, it's trite to say, but like we let them kind of do their thing and stay out of their way. So that's one. Two is another thing is like when I started the agency with a partner, we were just taking every single dollar out of the business, right? We didn't ever have any plans, truthfully, to start an agency. We're kind of like just had the freelancer mindset that we just wanted to eat what we kill and put everything back into our pockets. That made it really, really hard to scale when we wanted to hire people because then we had to wait for the cash to build up, pretty quickly. Versus if we had it already, we could have hired people, right? So I think those are some of the other things, like too, that people don't think about or talk about is like managing cash flow, making sure that you have a reserve in the account, hiring the right people. Like they're going to be expensive, right? You're going to have to come up with things like healthcare and all these other things that like really made us put up on our grown-up pants that we weren't really ready for initially. So those were kind of initial thoughts.
Yeah, that was amazing. You were just dropping fire right there. I had like so many little things, and I was like, I'm just gonna let him keep talking because this is really good. But yeah, it kind of a lot of people forget that clients and B2B, there's a lot of the same principles compared to copywriting, right? So it's like people don't necessarily remember what you said or did; they remember how you made them feel. So whether it's you made them money or whether it's you made them feel like a first-class client or person, they remember that. And as an agency owner, it's like the easiest way to get another client is to retain one that you already have. So a lot of people forget about that. Um, yeah, so there were a lot of gold nuggets there.
Yeah,
Now, as far as
one other thing to add, sorry to cut you off. The other thing that I think that really hurt us initially, and now it's been a positive thing that we've implemented this is in the early days, like we didn't record or document a single thing, right? If we had documented and just honestly took a Zoom recording or a Loom recording or whatever you use to record your screen, if we just had recorded us going through our days of like, how did we communicate with clients? And when we went into their Klaviyo accounts, what did we do? Where did we start, right? We started by looking at their dashboard at their total revenue, their revenue based off Klaviyo, the breakdown between campaigns and flows. And that gave us kind of the crystal ball of, oh, wow, they're sending a lot of campaigns and campaign revenue strong. We need to keep doing this. But over here, B, like they've really completely ignored all these automations. Like, let's start here and let's prioritize the highest revenue ones first, right? Let's work on like the welcome series for non-buyers, the abandoned checkout, the abandoned cart, kind of some cross sells and upsells. If we had recorded from the start everything that we did and just talked basically to ourselves and talked to the screen about the logic, man, that would have saved us so much time when we went to go build processes and onboarding and training. Whereas we didn't do that, right? We were just so focused on the day to day and never planning for the future that we then had to go back in time, like record everything, document everything. And that again slowed us down. And all of these things that we did in the beginning, we really paid for over the past like 18 months. Like we've had like an ongoing 3 to 4 month wait list for new clients because we couldn't scale fast enough. We didn't have enough cash in the bank initially. We didn't have processes documented. We didn't have a system for onboarding. And now that we finally solved these things as of like the past 3 to 6 months, dude, our trajectory is insane. Like we went before from only being able to onboard, let's say like 4 to 6 clients a month to now we're onboarding double that. And we have, the business to keep doubling and tripling every single month. I think that's the last thing I would say is like, when you're in the now, you might not think what you're doing is significant, but just record it. At the very least, you'll be able to see how far you've come individually. And at the very best, you'll be able to hand that off to someone that is going to come in and take things off your plate, right? The goal is to replace yourself. So Troy, if you're doing the copywriting and you're doing this and you're doing that, you want people to come in and take as many things off your plate as you can. And you want people to specialize. So on our email team, we have 5 different roles. We've got a marketer, right? So that's really who replaced me. Like I see myself as a marketer. We had a copywriter, right? So we brought in world-class copywriters to handle that piece. We brought in designers, right? Like I can do stick figures, but I can't make beautifully designed emails. We have account managers, and then we have what we call implementers, which are just basically coders, HTML developer type folks. So we basically looked at what we did. We figured out these are the 5 things. How do we bring in snipers for each of those things and really bring in specialists and remove ourselves from the day-to-day? So that way we could focus on the biz dev, the partnership, the content, the training, the things that are really going to move the needle, right? You need the folks that are mainly focused on the today. And then those folks like that are the visionaries, the leaders, the business founders, the C-level execs, whatever you want to call it, that are really focused on the future, the tomorrows.
That was amazing. So for anybody who's listening, you just heard a lot of secrets of scale right there because I can attest to that. And I'm kind of going through some of the same things. So I hadn't hired anybody in person until July. And when I did that, I kind of realized a lot of things I was doing were just in my head. And I really did need to document them so I can, tell a new hire, like, hey, here's what we need to be doing. So typically our process, the very first thing we'll do for a client, and sometimes this is sold as a separate service, is we'll fix their deliverability. So if they're hitting spam or the promo tab, that's the fastest way that we can make the most money for the client like today. Second thing, if they're not sending daily emails, we start sending daily. So that's the second fastest thing that'll make the second highest amount of money. And then the third thing is fixing all the automations, like you had mentioned, obviously, like welcome series, abandoned cart are super important. So, we don't have as many roles probably because we work more with like direct response and like personal brands, coaches. But yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out because it's like we have a process now. And each team member works with one client and they go through the process and have to get everybody up to speed. So that was really good.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off again. It's interesting. Sorry, I just as you're saying things, it keeps prompting me to say things. So apologies, but yeah, I actually put a thread out on Twitter about this the other day, where like when I was diagnosing a lot of the issues that we faced with our clients, other than the ones I mentioned, right, like making sure we had enough cash in the bank, making sure that we documented things. The other thing that happened, it kind of happened intentionally, but unintentionally, is when we look at our team and our bottleneck, right? I mentioned we had an ongoing multi-month waitlist. One of the other huge bottlenecks was the fact that we were basically working with clients that wanted so much design. A lot of the clients that came to us were these, what we call like D2C darlings that were really focused on design, and they're less copy heavy, direct response. Obviously, right? We're designing for conversions and things are performing, but the way that you run your business is such a different business, right? Like if we could run our business that way, we'd have a lot more scale, right? We'd be able to do a lot more with less resources, right? We're working with 115, 120 something clients, and we've got like 65 or 70 people, right? Not in a bad way, but we're pretty bloated, right? We've got a lot of people and a lot of clients. And the bottleneck has always been the design. We've got the most number of designers on our team, and we have to keep hiring designers. So because we started working with those types of brands initially, because we had good designers, so we have a partner that's great at design. So we started working with those brands. Those are the type of brands that we kept attracting, right? Kept attracting the more of the D2C darlings because they came in through referrals and they came in through content, which kind of kept going on this rat race of this bottleneck of design, right? And now one of the things that we've done is we've kind of broken our email team into two different pods, as we're calling them, or two different kind of divisions. One is what we're calling the experiential division, which is really focused on these D2C darlings, where design is the point of emphasis. Clients come to us on this team because we have the best design in the entire industry, right? Obviously, other people have great designs too. So we're the best, or we're tied with the best, right? So they come to us for that specific reason. They obviously get the copy, they get all these other things and whatnot. Now we have a new team that we started about, I don't know, a quarter or so ago, maybe at the beginning of Q4, that we're calling the performance team. And we still do have a designer on the team, but these are the clients that are like, hey, design is totally secondary. I want it to look on brand. I want it to look presentable, but not everything has to be pixel perfect. I'm not going to, point about this and this and this and slow down the process because of design. So this team is more copy and email and strategy heavy, right? And that's been really, really interesting. So yeah, again, when you think about like who you are and who you serve, it didn't dawn on me that like, oh man, we are so design constrained because those are the brands that we keep attracting because those are the brands that we had. So I kind of had like this aha moment like 6 months ago, and working with our team and my partners, we kind of finally started to solve it about 3 months ago.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's really cool too for anyone listening who's like, man, should I go this way or that way or the other way? It's like, this is my experience. That's Chase's experience. Your experience might be different, but hopefully you've heard something that's really going to help you, and you take it for what it is and go implement it with what works for you. So, um, a really fun question that I didn't even think about until I heard you say it is I posted a meme one time in one of my Facebook groups. It was the one where the guy is sleeping next to his wife, and she's like, he's probably thinking about other women. And the thought bubble is above his head, and he says, is it pronounced Clavio or Clavio? So that's my question for you. You're saying Clavio. I've always said Clavio. I have no idea if there's an official word out there or.
They have it somewhere, and they even have a T-shirt on it. But now that I actually don't know, I kind of go back and forth between Clavio and Clavio. I've been saying Clavio lately. I have no idea, but they do have a T-shirt somewhere out there that people have, and I've seen that there is a right way to say it. But I actually don't know. It's like tomato, tomato. It doesn't really matter. Whatever the client says is cool. If they say Clavio, I'm going to say Clavio. If they say Clavio, I'm going to say Clavio. I'm going to mirror what they say.
That's amazing. Yeah. So before we get into like a couple of questions here that people are posting, another really fun question is, what is the best business idea you've ever had and the worst business idea?
The best one and the worst one. Oh man, I thought I had a lot of great ideas. It ended up being a lot of terrible ideas. In a lot of times, like the terrible ideas, they're not terrible ideas. It's just terrible timing. Like on a couple of these ideas that we had, we just were way too early. So one of the things that I worked on was like basically, if you guys know what Cameo is right now, it was a Cameo, but back in like 2015 or 2016. So it was just way too early. Where basically people would pay celebrities or athletes for video. So we basically had a concept like that, and it wasn't a bad idea. It was just the wrong time. One kind of funny idea that we got involved with was this dating site called Bernie Singles for people that supported the presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. I was working at a ed tech company, a startup, and I was doing well, but I had that really entrepreneurial itch to do something on the side. So the easy low hanging fruit was starting an agency. And when we started talking to people, they didn't want to hire us. We were pretty fresh out of college and we only had one job. So we were trying to figure out like, how do we get experience if we don't have experience, right? So we found this site called Bernie Singles, and we just hit them up saying, hey, we'll do marketing for free. We think this is freaking hilarious and this has a lot of potential. And the guys were like, oh, we actually don't want to run this anymore. We'll sell it to you for like $5,000. So we bought the site for like $5,000 and it went viral. It literally was on like Ellen DeGeneres, Stephen Colbert, Huffington Post. Like it was on hundreds of press outlets and on TV shows and all over Facebook. And we got millions of visitors to the site in the first few months. Granted, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how it was built. The site was down every single day because of too much traffic, right? Which obviously is a great problem to have, but we didn't know what we were doing on the back end. So we could never get the site up. So we got so much hate and so much trash that we ended up selling it later after investing a lot of money and time into it for not too much more than we paid for, right? So it ended up being a big, what we thought was going to be a big W ended up being a big L. So again, there's been a ton of bad ideas, whether it's a bad idea, wrong timing, or just poor execution. I started a CBD brand for dogs, which we executed so well, but I had like 6 partners. There were so many cooks in the kitchen. Everyone wanted to point fingers. No one wanted to do any work. So I ended up getting bought out of that business just because I didn't want to deal with it. And I think to this day, they're probably still fighting about who's going to do what, and they haven't done anything, right? So those are the bad ideas. Um, Good ideas. The best idea that I think that I'm working on right now is one that solves our own itch. So I kind of mentioned that like design is our biggest bottleneck and our constraint. So I'm literally building an email design platform or tool that's going to allow people to create beautifully designed emails in a matter of minutes. And really the goal there was to build it internally, but there's been so much interest and demand externally that it's going to be both an internal, external tool. So it's going to be a SaaS company. I just think a lot of big ESPs, whether that's Klaviyo, MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, they haven't really ever put an emphasis on their design builders, right? They're so much more focused on segmentation, campaigns, automations, deliverability, right? Really the core things, the essential things. Like we want those ESPs to focus on those things. If they ignore those things and just focus on design, we'd probably all be in spam, right? So I'm building an email design tool that I think is going to be a really good business, hopefully.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of nuggets in there too. So now what I'm going to do is open up the floor for questions. I see a bunch of them in the chat right now. So this is the Q&A portion. Let's see what we've got going. I think I saw one. Oh, here we go. In your opinion, would you only use Klaviyo for ecom?
That's a hard question. I personally only use Klaviyo for ecom, so it's hard to say anything else. That being said, like I've seen and become friends with other ESPs, whether that be like Drip or SendLane or Privny or Omnisend. They're all great tools, right? So I really think it comes down to what are you most comfortable with? I started on Klaviyo. I really like Klaviyo, so I use that for all my clients. But if you started on Omnisend or Drip or Privy or something else that you really like, ActiveCampaign, I would use the platform that you are the most comfortable with. I would hate to tell you go use Klaviyo and you only use Klaviyo because I told you to use Klaviyo, right? So pick the platform that you're most comfortable with. And maybe you don't have to be platform agnostic, right? I personally only use Klaviyo, but I know other agencies that will use Klaviyo and other platforms. So I think there is an opportunity to become, like myself or Troy or other folks on the Omnisend, on the Drip, on the Privy, right? And really become one of their top agency partners, which ends up leading to a lot of referrals and business.
Yeah, that's good too. Feedy asked the question, so thank you for that. My friend Jan Lesnovsky always says switching ESPs and expecting better results is like switching gyms and expecting to get bigger. So I always like that analogy, and it really proves that it's more about what you do rather than what you're using. Jared Buck comments with a link, and he says it's officially pronounced Klaviyo. So
Okay.
it sounds like that has been settled. That's always a fun one. Funny too, I accidentally used the word "been settled," but maybe he'll be on here in the future. Feedy asked another question. What are some of the best subject lines that you've seen? I know this is also a very open-ended question, but
Oh man, yeah, it's tough. It depends on like what it is, right? Like there's certain email subject lines that you're going to use for a customer thank you email versus an abandoned cart versus a welcome email, right? So I mean, a lot of the ones that are standard on like the welcome are like, welcome to a brand's name, welcome to the family, welcome to the tribe, like welcome to the community, just something like welcome, right? So I think it just depends. Like abandoned cart, you left something behind. Like a lot of honestly, like the cookie cutter standard ones work because so many people are using them that people know what they are and they want to see if you're going to send a deal. And they're also the reason that flows and automations work. Obviously, you need to have decent subject lines. They work because there's intent, there's relevancy, right? And that's really the name of the game of email. Is like you're only as good as the traffic that and the leads that are coming through and the intent that they have. And the further down the funnel they have in the abandoned cart, the abandoned checkouts, and post purchase, you more or less could do anything that's normal or maybe on brand, and people are going to open, right? So it matters more, like I think where you land, and obviously open rates and from name and preview text and all those things matter too. So I don't have like any subject lines that are going to work on any single email, regardless of them. It really is like a case by case basis. So if you have a specific one that you want to see, let me know and I'll try to come up with some.
that's amazing. Thank you for that. And Tony asks, and this is honestly a very good question. What advice would you give to someone transitioning from doing email for direct response clients to someone doing work for ecom clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with anyone, I think this works for direct response or ecom is setting expectations, right? Like on the direct response side, the expectations that you have to align on there are probably very different, right? they probably want daily emails, long form copy, and they're really focused on conversion, right? And obviously, at the end of the day, conversion is the goal and should be the goal for a lot of people. On e-com sides, as I kind of mentioned before, a lot of the clients that came to us, their primary goal is beautifully designed emails, right? Obviously, they want them to convert, and we need to make them convert, and that's how we obviously retain clients. So I think aligning on expectations with clients is super important. Like, do they fall in the middle, or are they more direct response driven? Or are they more, design heavy? I think that's one. And then, two, the other thing there is like, um, being able to properly assess in the audit where they're at and where you think you can get them, right? And you don't want to give very specific numbers. You don't want to say, hey, you're doing 10% of revenue from email, and I promise you in 3 months you're going to be at 15. You want to say something like, hey, right now you're doing 10% of revenue from email. These are the things that you have. These are the things that are working. Here's the low hanging fruit. And based off of the work that we've done with similar brands in similar industries, our goal over the next 3 to 6 months is to try to get you in the ballpark of 15 to 20% of your revenue coming from email. That's going to be our goal. And our goal every month is not just the revenue as a percentage, but we're going to increase the amount of dollars you're doing from email every single month, right? So that's kind of how I look at it, is like setting the expectation and really putting the work in up front on the audit side to make sure that you guys are aligned and can kind of spell out together the KPIs that are going to lead to success. If you as the agency can do what you say you're going to do, will that lead the client to keeping you on? If the answer is yes, do that, right? And if the answer is not sure, you need to get kind of definitive answers of what are they looking for? Have they worked with other agencies? Where did those agencies go wrong? What did they like, right? So I think the more information that you can collect and get up front, the better it's going to be for both parties.
Perfect. Another question from Nicole. The basis of it is essentially there's a client that wants to hire her to not necessarily manage the list and send daily in Klaviyo, but to set it up. So let's say somebody has a new Klaviyo account. They're like, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing. Maybe they have a
Okay.
few subscribers they want to import, but it's kind of hard to price it because you're not really sure of the value you're providing to that business. It's not as clear. So what advice would you give to somebody who's setting up a Klaviyo account as far as what to charge?
Yeah. So if we're going and talking just about like setting up like the core automations, right? Obviously it depends on like what you define as core automation. So it depends on the number of automations and the number of emails within the automations. That being said, to give a more specific answer. So we don't typically we will never ever do a one-off flow project. It just doesn't make sense for us to take on projects. We're really focused on retainers. I think retainers really is the name of the game. But again, if you're starting out and you're trying to figure this out, taking on projects is okay. So most people that I've seen that take on this type of work, they're typically setting up 4 to 6 core flows. Each core of the flow has anywhere in the ballpark of, let's say, 2 to 4 emails. That's things like the welcome series, the abandoned cart, the customer thank you, kind of a win back, those types of things. They're charging in the ballpark of like $3,000 to $6,000 a month for kind of a one-time core setup. So if you're looking at, let's say, 4 flows, that might be 12 emails that you're setting up, right? And that could be in the ballpark of 3 to 6,000. Depends on the size of the business, right? Like, is this a 6, 7, 8, 9 figure business that just doesn't happen to have email? You'd be surprised like how many 6, 7, 8 figure businesses have email, but they're really doing like 0 to 5% of their revenue, and they don't have these core flows, or they have these flows set up from like 6 years ago and they haven't thought about it since. So again, I can't give you an exact price, but depending on how many automations you set up, how many emails within those automations, most people that I'm seeing are charging 3 to 6,000 as a one-time setup fee.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that too. And I do agree that obviously retainers are king, and it makes everybody happy. A lot of times agencies get a bad rap, and it's like, oh, they only care about retainers. It's like, well, when you get people results, they're happy to pay. So again, it's all about the value there.
Yeah, and the other side of
Um,
that too, like I would argue, like when you charge retainers, you basically are fishing for business less often. So you're actually probably more focused, right? Because if you don't have to go fish for business every month, like you switch from doing prospecting and sales to more focusing on retention. I think when you get to that sweet spot of, obviously you have to do sales, you have to do prospecting, you need leads coming in the door. And the goal of your freelance business, your agency, should be to scale to some degree, right? Maybe you don't need to be 100 employees with tens of millions of dollars in revenue, but maybe you want to scale to be a 5 or 6 figure a month business, right? And that's great. And that can be awesome. But you need to focus on retention. So I think when you do retainers, you actually put yourself in the driver's seat to focus more on retention, because you don't have to go hunt every single month for people to pay the same amount of money that you've been used to making.
That's a good point too. One of my friends from Copy Accelerator, Brian Sprindell, he gives that advice to freelancers where You can essentially ask clients for referrals by saying like, hey, if I don't have to go look for clients,
Yeah.
then I can spend more time on you and get work done faster and get it done better. So a lot of times too, it's like you can incentivize people with things other than money,
Yes.
as far as, bringing on more people, scaling agencies, businesses, things like that. So this has been an amazing crash course, that's for sure, on building an agency. I wasn't really sure where today's call would go. I had a bunch of good questions, and I've seen you on the internet a lot, so I knew it was going to be good. But for anybody who's running an agency, please watch this again. Or anybody who's doing ecom or using Klaviyo, not Clavio. So Chase, thank you so much for being on here. Do you have any last things to say?
Yeah, no, first off, appreciate you. I think the last thoughts that have come to my mind as I'm thinking about like where we were versus like where we're at and like where we're going is like, um, I mean, yeah, a lot comes to my mind. Like one is like, and these are kind of more just me, like, I guess, digesting and venting kind of my regional thoughts is like, it's weird to have like, quote unquote, like mid-level managers, right? Like it's weird to now have like someone in between you and the people on your team, right? For a long time, it was myself, my partner in the weeds, doing everything, working with, our counterparts and our team members where we were their direct report, right? And now it's almost weird having like these layers of like on each of the teams, right? So I talked about the marketing team, the copywriting team, the design team, et cetera. They all have juniors and seniors, and then they all have a team lead, right? So on our design team, we have like 20 or 25 people. So we have junior designers, senior designers, and now we have like a head of design and we have a head of copy. So that's been kind of something interesting, right? And like, how do you incentivize these people that are kind of this intermediate person? Because like, they're never going to be the business owner like the you, right? And they're going to be this middle person. Like, how do you incentivize them, right? Giving them autonomy, rewarding them monetarily, giving them opportunity to kind of lead on the hiring and the growth and selecting the clients they want to work with, iterating the process. So that's kind of been an interesting thing that I never thought I'd have to like deal with or overcome. But that's been cool. The other thing is like, there are stages I've really seen throughout this agency where like when it was just me and my partner and we were taking everything that we made and putting into our own pockets, like, dude, we were so profitable, right? We were like 80, 90% profit margins. We were like, sweet, we could build this agency to, however many hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And we're going to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. This is going to be awesome. Right. And then you realize, right, like there's these stages of like, as you start hiring people, right? Then you go from like 90% profits to like 50% profits, right? And then you start hiring people more and you're like, oh shit, I'm at like 30% profits. And then you're like, all right, now I got to start charging more. And you go back to like 50%, right? So it's been like this really interesting like ebb and flow of like going from like almost being 100% profitable as two people, obviously not making as much money per month revenue wise, but probably making just as much money in your own pocket as you go through some of these levels. And then you kind of go up. So it's like this really interesting stage where like, I'll just give out random numbers. Like I don't remember the exact numbers, I'm not going to give specific numbers, but like say my partner and I were each making like 15 or 20K a month when we were just freelancing, right? We put all that into our pocket. Then when you start hiring people, maybe instead of doing the 30 or 40K that the agency was doing, we're now doing like 60K, but instead of putting the 15 or 20K in our pockets, we're maybe only putting like 8 to 12 in our pockets, right? And then you kind of go to this phase where it's like, wow, we're now doing $100,000 and we're back to the 15 or 20. And then, right, like it's kind of just been like this really interesting ebb and flow of like the number of revenue you do every single month isn't directly correlated to how much you make, right? Because now we have to save and we're hiring, and every time we do a big hiring spree, the cash, in terms of profitability drops, and then it swings back up as you bring in clients. So, anyways, these are just some of the things that are like on my mind that I've been like digesting. Like, I knew nothing about any of this, and I know some about it now, and I'm learning every day, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's amazing to share too, because you're right. A lot of people don't realize some of those things. And, it's like you can hear other people talk about it, but a lot of times it's like you need to experience it yourself. So hopefully this has been a really good insight for somebody who is looking to scale an agency or like do anything in the realm of email, because I'm not just saying this because you're here live. It's like you sincerely dropped a lot of knowledge bombs, more so than probably anybody I've ever interviewed or been interviewed by, in regard to email and like agency growth. So this has been
Appreciate
amazing.
that. I'll leave you with one more thing then. The other really interesting thing is like pricing models and like how you price and what you charge. And do you do a flat fee? Do you do a performance only? Do you do a hybrid? So when we started out, we were just doing straight retainers, right? And then we kind of were like, oh man, maybe we should do like lower retainers plus performance pay. And I think that's like the ideal and the goal, but in theory, it was a lot harder for us to actually implement while we scaled. And here's the reason why. So say we were charging 5K a month, right? We would then drop maybe our retainer to, let's say, 3K a month on the retainer side. We might take, let's say, 5 or 7.5% of email revenue. So, but what we did wrong, and maybe this was just us, is we billed for the entire thing at the end of the month. So once we saw the performance, we were billing essentially what's called net 30 days. But what we didn't realize is a lot of these clients have their own payment terms where once they receive the invoice, they then wait net 7, net 14, net 30 days to pay you. So oftentimes when we were doing performance, we wouldn't collect cash for like 60 days. And then, I talked about having to save money and having to float. You're not having to float 2 months of payroll, right? If you pay people bi-weekly, that's 4 pay periods that you have to float while trying to collect cash. So for us, we only do retainers right now. In a very, very rare case, maybe we'd be open to doing a performance thing now that we have obviously some cash reserves and this, that, and the other. But that was kind of interesting for us. So we're 6 to 8K a month flat retainers, and our goal is to keep increasing. And when I think about like the pricing tiers, I talked about this, I think a little earlier, I posted about this. Small agencies starting out, as they kind of get some experience, I see they're typically charging like 1 to 3,000 a month. Kind of the mid tier is typically charging like 4 to 6K a month. And then the high tier is kind of in the 7 to 10K a month. So that's kind of like where we're going because our services are great. Our work is great. So that was kind of just an interesting thing in terms of like my experience with kind of performance pay. I really like it in theory. We ended up on paper making a lot more money, but we ended up having to wait 60 days to actually collect it every single time. So it was kind of a massive like collections nightmare. And that's all I've got. Those are all my secrets.
That's amazing. And the cool thing I like about this is I'm not just here to ask questions. I think it's better when I'm here to also learn, just like everybody who is watching and will watch this. So, and then hopefully you can learn too. So the one thing that I've done, take it for what it is, but I do charge like majority base, but there is a small percentage, somewhere between 1 and 5% on the back end. And we charge that after the month, but the retainer comes before. So
Smart.
it's
Super
kind
smart.
of just a way to shift and get the cash flow a month earlier. But yeah, there's
That's the
also
way to do it for sure. Yeah.
yeah. So thank you so much. And again, this was amazing for anybody who is looking at running a marketing agency, like a very legitimate marketing agency, or anybody who's doing ecom or Klaviyo marketing. So if you're interested in seeing future episodes, below this video, there's a link where you can watch all the Secrets of Scale podcasts and register for the live ones just like this. You can also check out some more material about myself and Chase. So thank you everyone for watching, and I hope to see you next time.